I would love to be able to set.
Good afternoon to those who are online. We'll go ahead and get started. Can I get a thumbs up if you can
But I
hear us
don't
correctly?
know how to finagle my way into saying to him, this is who I am. So if you could kind of help mediate that.
Yeah.
I would love to sit with him.
Thank you so much. Appreciate that.
Talk through, like,
Go ahead and get started.
But yeah.
Even like our service is complimentary. Well, it depends on what day you ask. Because the first day.
Wait, Ms. Johnson, or we got 13 people already.
Oh, cool, okay. I'll go ahead. I'll go ahead, sorry.
Because people were chasing their tails, trying to figure out what they're. So. I know I heard that. She's working.
Are we on?
Yes, sir.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. We'll go ahead and get started. Thank you to everyone who's in the room and thank you to everyone who's online. Just so you know, Councilwoman Mamie Johnson is on her way. I know she'll be a few minutes late, but we'll go ahead and get started and we'll catch her up when she gets here. The topic for this meeting today is really focusing on the people aspect of disaster. Last week, we had a really good conversation, thanks again to Mike and your team, about a response to a East Palestine type of incident here, which could very well happen, knowing the amount of facilities that store ethyl methyl death, that transport by rail or highways. So things do happen, things could happen. And I think we have a pretty good plan of how we would respond. We, as in fire rescue, in partnership with the Virginia Department of Emergency Management, as well as Virginia DEQ, as well as the Coast Guard, as well as EPA. And the plan really spells out how we would all be working together, not only the responders out on the scene, but us in the Emergency Operations Center from a policy standpoint, certainly from a messaging standpoint. So we would have that unified effort. Along with the responsible party. We're just having a conversation about the responsible party in a different type of scenario, but never letting the responsible party leading the message, leading the way, leading any of the efforts other than paying the bills that we send their way for the cleanup and the other things. So we had some good technical discussion. Materials, oil, chemical response. This meeting is focusing on the human aspect. You know, what happens when we do have to evacuate folks out of the area. But this isn't just a conversation about oil and hazmat. This is all hazardous. So this is what we would be doing for an active threat scenario, whether it's a school bus incident where there's fatalities, whatever it is, we would be using this plan and massage it as able, because it's a pretty fluid plan to bring the stakeholders together to make sure that the people get their immediate and long-term services that they need. So this plan is called the Family Reception and Victim Assistance Center Plan. I think a lot of you guys will remember the term Family Reunification Center. To me, and I'll defer to my friends who have done this, I think reunification is not a good word. Very misleading. So at least we can do is receive them in this reception area where the death notifications take place, and the like. And that's exactly what the purpose of the reception center is. One of the benefits of having to have such a plan. And so we are able to leverage a lot of what they had, and then also the lessons learned from other incidents to really make it as effective as possible, really being, I don't want to say customer focused, but certainly victim focused, trauma informed way of getting folks the resource that they need right away, with an understanding of that entire process. One of the things that I learned while being on the General Assembly's commission to investigate the Virginia Beach shooting is, and someone who should be here today, is the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner's Office. Because they have a process whereby they look and inspect the remains to make a positive scientific identification. So that information is then relayed to the police department, who by law are the ones who make those death notifications. I believe at the Virginia Tech incident, that took 16 hours, if I'm not mistaken. And I think the Virginia Beach shooting, the first notification was made 5 hours after the. Now, we also know that the state police has a DNA capability where it could be done in a couple hours. And that process is endorsed by the OCNA. And so hopefully it'll be even quicker, but establishing realistic expectations at the reception center is something that we definitely need to keep in mind. But first, I'm remiss if I don't go around the room so everyone knows who's here, as well as online, if you don't mind. So I'm Jim Reddick. I get to be the Director of Emergency Preparedness and Response here for the city of Norfolk.
Good afternoon, I'm Karen Lovely, I'm Jim's assistant.
Good afternoon, everybody. Daniel Hudson. Emergency Management Coordinator. Scott Mahone, Deputy Emergency Management Coordinator.
Tim Frazier, Naval Support Activity, Hampton Roads, Emergency Management.
Dawn Bush, Department of Criminal Justice Services, Outreach and Training Specialist for the victims crime assistance, victim. Ooh, I'm tongue tied because it's too much to say altogether. It's victims, now I have a mind blank. It's our VCAR, it's our Emergency Crisis Response Team. I'm sorry.
I'm Carol Wilson. I'm the victim specialist assigned to the Norfolk field office of the FBI, and I assist on like federal casualty events.
Emily Swig with the Park Ranger Unit here for Chief John Cruz.
Hey, good afternoon, Jared Hernig, go to you, Emergency Manager.
Mike Rose, Deputy Fire Marshal, City of Norfolk.
David Patrick, American Electronics, is at the post.
Chris Jones, I'm with the City of Norfolk's Comms Department.
Kelly Straub, also with the city's council.
Thank you. And I'm really glad you guys are here because everything that we're doing requires unified, accessible, timely messaging. So thank you for being here.
And for those of you online, I'll go down the list and call out your name if you wouldn't mind coming off mute. Go ahead and tell us who you are and what organization you're with. We'll start with Gary Lupton. Kathy Chancellor.
This is Kathy Chancellor, the risk manager for the city.
Kathy. Cheryl Simpson.
Cheryl Simpson, Independence Center.
Thank you. Carolyn.
Carolyn Delorso, I'm the ombudsman with the Virginia Criminal Injuries Compensation Fund or Virginia Victims Funds.
Larry Hill, State Health Department.
Larry, I didn't hear you, Larry. Well, go ahead since you chimed in. Larry Hill.
Okay, Larry Hill, Virginia Department of Health, Regional Public Information Officer.
Thank you. Lisa Hicks.
I'm Lisa Hicks, I'm the Director of Victim Witness for the Commonwealth Attorney's Office.
Thank you. Karen Rose.
Karen Rose, Norfolk Redevelopment and Housing Authority, Security Programs Director.
Thank you. Andrew Kinch.
Hi, I'm Andrew Kinch with Department of Criminal Justice Services. I'm the VCART program specialist.
Thank you. Anthony Lloyd.
Hi, I'm Anthony Lloyd, Senior Director for Operation Blessings U.S. Disaster Relief Team.
Thank you, Anthony. Christopher Morales.
Hello, Chris Morales, Department of Human Services, Facilities Management.
Thank you, sir. Steve from HRT.
Good afternoon, Steve McGarrow, Emergency Manager, Hampton Roads Transit. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And Tim at the Chrysler Museum.
Yeah, I'm Tim. I'm the Emergency Management Manager at the Chrysler Museum of Art.
Thank you. And Eve from Virginia Department of Health.
Hi, I'm Eve Zentridge with the Norfolk Health Department, and I am their Public Health Emergency Coordinator.
Thank you, Eve. Is there anyone else online that I missed?
Yes. Adrian Grieve with the American Red Cross. I'm the Division Disaster State Relations Director.
Thank you, sir. Final call, is there anyone else that I missed online? All right, thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you, Daniel. So a little bit of a smaller group than we had during the tech here. So I think we're going to have a really good conversation about how to make this plan the best, most useful plan, not only for Norfolk, but one that we can share with our partners to make sure that everyone's resources are made aware, and how to make the contact and how we would work together before, during, and after an incident. So Daniel, if you don't mind just scrolling up, I think it's important to really start with some definitions. And I'm not going to read the entire plan to you. You'll have a copy of this. We'll update it and send it out to you based on the input that we have today, along with the hazardous material plan that we updated last time. But there's two things, the reception center and then the family assistance center, which I have to get used to the new terminology now that we're using, the reception center and the victim assistance center. The reception center is going to be opened as quickly as possible after a mass casualty event, mass fatality event, for those death notifications. So that's the sole purpose of that. The assistance center is what we transition to make sure that folks have access and awareness to the resources that are available to them by the state and other programs for long-term mental health, other assistance, financial assistance, medical needs, and everything else. Neither of them are shelters. They are not intended to be shelters. There are no overnight accommodations or anything else like that. It is all about the unification of resources. So immediate for the next of kin notifications, and then transitions to long-term care assistance. And we'll get into the, our partners and what they all provide.
We're looking for questions.
Oh, please do. Yes.
I may have missed some of the context, but what was the thinking and changing from Family Assistance Center to Victim Assistance Center?
That was nothing outside of Norfolk. It was us. But I can tell you from my awareness of what happened in Virginia Beach, all right, is that a lot of folks who were eligible for assistance did not go to the Family Assistance Center because they thought it was for families of the deceased.
Okay.
Chesapeake was the same issue, I believe, the Walmart
There's
there.
actually a changing dynamic where we're trying to figure out how to rename that so that it's more all-inclusive, so that they're not mistaking that in a lot of.
So from the Walmart briefing that we got from Rob at our AHAC, the assistance being provided or offered by Walmart wasn't necessarily inclusive of others who were impacted and would also be eligible for assistance. So we just figured calling it a victims assistance center would be more accurate, if you will, and really kind of articulate what it is.
What you described a moment ago, because families would go there to get their notifications, that there's going to be people that don't know and want to find out.
Right.
So by calling it the victims.
No, so that.
Is it separate or?
It is. Okay. So there's the family reception center, and that's where the notifications of the deceased happens, the family reception center. And then once all those notifications are made, then we transition to the victims assistance center, where all of those different support services would be. I'm glad you said that. And there's so many lessons learned from Virginia Beach about how to operate a family reception center and the people movement of the, people being notified and not necessarily retracing their steps to go back out the same way they came in front of people who are still waiting and stuff like that. So we really took a lot of lessons from that particular incident.
We got a couple questions online.
Okay.
Larry Hill.
Okay, so I've been through like 3 or 4 of these mass shooting incidents, just for starters, to get to what you talk about. I first of all, kudos to the name change that you guys are doing. This is something that I've been preaching ever since Virginia Tech. I do a lot of stuff with the communication side, but also public health side of things. And I've done, so I've had meetings with psychiatrists about the termination of the reunification center. And my big concern, and I know North Carolina's changed their rules out there. I spoke down there about this, about when you had the name reunification center, you gave some people some false expectations when they went there. I was there at Virginia Tech, and I met all 32 families, and I know there was some real grief. But they have expectations when they hear reunification center that families are going there to be reunited, and there are going to be families that will not be united. So they have a false expectation. So I'm so glad to hear this change is coming along further and further now, because that psychiatrist that I spoke to with also talked about some of the mental health issues that can come out of that when you had this big high and all of a sudden you had this terrific low. So there's other different things that you guys are doing with this, which I think is good as well. But I just think that one change to me is terrific. Virginia Beach changed it when they had their incident. Chesapeake used it at first. I didn't hear it very often used, but after that first time I heard about it. But I think you guys are doing some great stuff with this, and I appreciate the change. I just wanted to share that.
Thank you, Larry.
Cheryl Simpson?
Hi, this is Cheryl. I agree with the name change. I think it's a good idea. But I was on the PIO call through AHAC yesterday or the day before, and they were talking about the Walmart shooting. And I asked about whether they had sign language interpreters at the press conferences, and it came out that they did not. So that is something that I strongly suggest, because you don't know who the people are and whether they have any family that may have a hearing impairment. And also at the Family Assistance Center, you should also have that ability to have translators and interpreters there, because you just don't know who's going to be coming in. That's my point.
Excellent point, Cheryl. And I think it's large part because of our partnership with you and Independence Center. Having interpreter services is part of our crisis communications plan, regardless of the incident. A lot of what we would be doing at the reception center or the Victims Assistance Center is consistent with what we would be doing in shelters as well. So I know we have the language line available. I know we have signage, universal signage available. And to your point, we'll work on having an interpreter as able at the assistance center as well. So thank you for that. We want to make sure that we are certainly meeting the needs of everybody. Thanks, Cheryl.
Yeah.
Oh.
Well, Cheryl, thank you for that. I think we may have somebody on contract, but I don't know how long ago that was. So Cheryl, if you don't mind, I may reach out to you to make sure that we've got something a little bit more substantial in place.
Thanks.
That's fine.
Any other questions?
No, sir.
All right. If you don't mind scrolling up a little bit there,
Yes, sir.
Daniel. All right, so we know what the reception center is. We know what the Family Assistance Center, Victims Assistance Center is. Now, what you would see in the annex or the appendices to this plan is the site selection, because you can't just take any particular facility and make it you work for this. So one of the things that me and the EOC team are committed to doing is really identifying what the square footage requirements are, how many rooms are needed, the technology requirements and all those things. We have all that information. Again, it'll be included in the appendices, and then try to identify sites throughout the community that we could serve in that capacity. Knowing still that a disaster is called a disaster for a reason. And the fact that Virginia Beach did have a site that was already identified, but was in use at that time for funeral purposes. So they had to pivot and work with their schools. One thing I don't necessarily want to do is try to work with schools or our rec centers, because we don't want to, the day-to-day operations go on, right? And so we know that there's before and after daycare programs, we don't want kids to be interrupted from their curriculum. So, whether it's working with houses of worship or other sites, because I know there could be issues even working with houses of worship. So really trying to identify sites, facilities, partners throughout the region that might be able to serve in this capacity in a compassionate environment for these critical notifications. So again, the appendices of this plan will show you the potential layout of these facilities, the square footage, all the different programs that will go on in these facilities. And what me and Scott and Daniel and Karen were talking about earlier is in Virginia Beach, there was a separate facility altogether. They had their reunification, their reception center at a particular school, and then down the road at the rec center was their family assistance center. I don't see the need to have two different facilities. I think if we're able to identify sites that can serve in both capacities, the mission just transitions to the assistance. It seemed like it would be a seamless transfer if we were able to do it in one facility, especially if folks had already gone to the one facility and was aware of that location. So that is our intent of just identifying one site, multiple sites throughout the locality that we can use. Are there any thoughts or ideas or concerns about site identification?
There's going to be a defined end of reception before you begin the assistance.
Yes.
Right?
Yes, yeah. No, I'm glad you said that. I mean, probably a closure of however many hours and then open it up as yeah.
Hi, Jim. It's Adrian Grave with the Red Cross.
Yes, sir.
So a lot of times we've seen them, especially if it's a transportation accident, using hotels, because that gives you the sleeping accommodations for anybody traveling into town. Plus, they typically have ballrooms and separate private rooms that you can set up for individual grief counseling, that sort of thing. So they've been very useful in the past.
Awesome. Thanks, Adrian. And that was a lesson learned from the the East Palestine incident in Ohio, was that the people who had to be evacuated from the area were sent to a particular hotel location. But then the assistance center was set up somewhere entirely different. And that made no sense to us. We would like to consolidate as much as possible. And if people are sheltered in a hotel, then we would like to have the assistance provided in. Go ahead.
Just one thing to be mindful of, this was a takeaway from Chesapeake Walmart. They actually had their FAC at a hotel. And if you choose to do that, that's fantastic. And I agree with being able to shelter people there as well if it's an incident like that, where that's required. But just keeping in mind that you're going to need those private areas as well. And that was a little tougher to maintain. So they had big sections of people that were talking and laughing in one corner, and in another corner, they had people that were trying to receive information about a lost loved one and they're grieving, and it just got a little sticky. So just being mindful that you're going to need those separate areas as well if you do decide to go with the ballroom style FAC.
And the other concern I've seen with hotels is that depending on how they lock down their entrances and exits, can be kind of hard to maintain security or keep people out that don't really need to be in there. But we'd have to be mindful of, like, how is that access, or how will we be screening who's coming in?
Gotcha.
And that also goes back to the media point that I made earlier, because with a hotel, general public has the right to come and go. You can't, if they're staying there and they are paying for a room, you can't tell them they can't enter into the location.
Right.
And so we didn't necessarily have the opportunity to ask everybody coming in, what is your purpose here? How can we help you? What assistance can we provide?
Okay.
And so just making sure that you have an area that you're going to be able to make sure media is staged completely away from your assistance center is going to be a key player.
I got you. So, and I'm glad you said that. We have in the plan about media, no media presence in the assistance center, right? And it's not because we're trying to hide anything at all. We want to provide as much non-investigatory information as possible. But we want to respect the privacy of the folks who are in there. And that's what we would communicate to our media partners. We can ask folks if they are willing to participate in interviews. And if so, go over here and help facilitate that. But it's all about the privacy information. But was there a question?
No, we had Cheryl Simpson wanted to add the center needs to have a quiet but too.
Mm-hmm.
And then Larry Hill chimed in, said Virginia Tech was at a hotel. We had the state police prevent access to where the families were staying and kept it quiet.
Okay.
Those are the only two, sir.
Awesome, thank you. So we know the difference between a reception center and the assistance center. We can talk about the logistical issues, which are gonna change depending on the incident. What I'm really looking forward to is the conversation about the resources, and the agencies who we know will arrive. We know that they'll arrive because we've seen them arrive. And we've seen the work that they've done in Virginia Beach, in Chesapeake, and other places. And so when we talk about people operate at the speed of trust, I trust these people who we would be making notifications right off the bat. The first department that we would be contacting in a group distribution actually would be Human Services. Chris, it's not lost on me that you're not here because I would be going to you quite a bit with questions. And I'm just giving you a hard time. But just like our emergency shelters, we would be looking at Human Services to be the manager of a reunification, excuse me, I got to get used to these terms, the reception center and the assistance center. That's not to say that you guys are operating every aspect of it, just providing the oversight in terms of accepting these from the facility, if you will, and relaying information, different resource needs, or whatever the issues are, back and forth to the EOC. Is that your expectation as well, Chris, from Human Services?
Yeah, we're looking forward on providing that kind of service. To piggyback off what you're saying, yeah, we're definitely we have a lot of stuff set up for everything that you're speaking about. We have services. We've gotten a lot of things together on our side to support emergency situations, as far as vehicles to drive people around, to grab people if we need to do anything. Our director has given us the opportunity to get so many things in line for emergency situations. So we're well prepared for whatever we have to do, and we have a unit and a team that's ready to go with anything that we have to partake in. If you understand.
Awesome.
Yep.
I understand perfectly. I appreciate that, Chris. Just so you know, we would have someone with you from the EOC to help identify site location, where different tables and different stations could be set up. So you wouldn't have to do that on your own. And I can tell you that the agencies who would be participating won't necessarily need a whole lot of guidance either. They understand the mission. They understand how to work with each other and you. So I'm hoping that it would be a pretty light lift. Again, just making sure that we can get into different spaces as needed, and just making sure that it's running, functioning, and reporting anything back to the EOC.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
Cool. All right, thanks, Chris. And then
No problem.
the other local agency would be CSB. And there's a significant reason that the CSB would be there, obviously being mental health. But not only that. So, and Jared, you know this very well, from the emergency management standpoint, any resource needs that we have, we make to the state's emergency operations center. We go into their WC, we request whatever the resource is, and that's how we get what we need, so long as there's a local declaration of emergency and all of our resources are exhausted. I learned in Virginia Beach, that's not how it works with mental health. We did contact our CSB folks because we knew that they were the ones with the subject matter expertise. And they reached out to their fellow CSBs and even mental health experts from ODU. And so those services were provided. But what I found out after the fact is that they have memorandums of understanding already in place from CSB to CSB, or the scenario could be a CSB kind of working for the Department of Behavioral Health and Human Services, or if there was a third component as well. But CSB is our link to make that resource request from a mental health capacity. It's nothing that we have to worry about from the emergency management side. So there's kind of two parallel logistical efforts one for actual resources and one for mental health resources. And so both of those will be working, and that's another reason why we would have the CSB there. I don't think anyone from CSB is online, right? Okay. So going down this list, one of the first organizations in that last notification would be the Department of Criminal Justice Services, DCJS. And I know there was someone from DCJS on the call. Because Dawn, you represent the compensation fund, right?
No, I'm BCJS.
Oh, yeah, well, duh, okay. Well, Dawn, let me turn it to you. I apologize for that.
That's okay. I work with the Victims Crisis Assistance and Response Team. That's the mouthful I was trying to get out earlier that I couldn't seem to get out. And we are a mighty team of 3 staff members. Andrew is on the call, and he takes care of all of our team members because we are made up of majority of volunteers. We currently have about 150 volunteers at staff. So when we get a call from a locality, what we do is we get the call, we assess what the need is of the local.
Can I pause you real quick?
Yep.
We are required by law to contact them.
It is in the Virginia State Code. We are codified for if the city is activated, if a hospital is activated, if a school is activated, or if a college campus is activated. So once we get that call, there's an assessment of the need of the locality and whether or not you need actual boots on the ground. If you need boots on the ground and you need us to assist in locale, your resources are overwhelmed, Andrew would immediately start to pull teams together that would best fit the need of the locality. And then we could come in and assist from hours from when it happened. We could assist at the family center, the reception center, or we could come in for longer term and assist at the assistance center where we can provide whatever it is the locality needs. So we can assist with getting people hooked up with Carolyn, who is on the call from Virginia Victims Fund. We can assist with getting them hooked up with the local CFPs and kind of directing the traffic flow for long-term mental health care. We can assist with things as simple as we responded to VCU back in November. And one of the biggest things we did for them was provide therapy dogs. So we can kind of take that under our wing. It's really whatever the locality needs for us. It could be something as easy as you need somebody to hand out water and point out where each table is, give directions. If your locality and your local resources are overwhelmed, we can most definitely come in and assist with whatever it is you need, as big or small. And we can be there. With Virginia Beach, we were there for a little over 2 years in and out with different teams. With VCU, it was 2 weeks in and out with different teams. So it's as little or as long. We also can come in later on and do group crisis intervention groups, which would give people a like peer group that was affected much in the same way they were, depending on the level of effect. And it gives them an opportunity to sit with a group of peers and have that peer validation that they're not the only one that went through that situation, and kind of get the information. Now, with that being said, we do not in turn come right back to the emergency managers or the city managers and say, this is what was said. Everything that is told to us in that room stays in that room unless there is a direct request. Like at Virginia Beach, we had some groups that would say, we don't want to take this back to management, but can you take this back to city management? And so if it's a unanimous decision that they would like us to do that, we can then take that management information back, and that kind of gives the takeaways that we come away with. Is this is what maybe could have been done a little different, or this is what we could have done better, or this is what we need to work on going forward. So we can also kind of assist in those areas. So we're kind of like a one-stop shop, and we can put out feelers. We co-partner with Virginia Victims Fund. So if we come out to a response, we coordinate response with them, and there's usually somebody there as well that can automatically start to meet with the victims and do victim compensation funds. we also partner and work very closely with our FBI people. And so our big thing is just making sure that we are adding to your response. We're not coming in to take it over. We want to make sure that we're helping. So we don't want anybody doing double the triple work. We want to make sure everybody knows what everybody else's plan is so that we can act effectively.
Awesome. Yeah, and the trigger, no pun intended, is it's an act of violent crime.
Yes,
So
ours has to be an act of violent crime. Unfortunately, we don't respond to anything that is hurricane, tornado, flood, anything like that, unless there is a component, like with Hurricane Katrina, which is the one that off the top of my head, I always use for an example. When Hurricane Katrina happened, being that it was a natural disaster, we wouldn't have typically responded. But because there was an upswing of sexual assaults that happened as a result of the storm, we were asked to assist. And so because there was that criminal component, you could come in and assist. And with us, it doesn't necessarily, because if you look up what mass means to different people, each organization has their own definition of what mass casualty is. And so with DCJS, it doesn't have to be 4 or more people that have been killed, 5 or more people that are killed, 3 or more people that are killed. It's when it overwhelms your city resources. So if you have an area that feels overwhelmed and you need additional hands, that's when we come in.
thanks, Dawn. I think that what's confusing on my end, and I wasn't thinking about this earlier when we talked, is so we're more resourced than other localities, right? Certainly from a public safety standpoint, and I'd even say from a mental health standpoint. But are those agencies aware of those resources that exist that you would be bringing to light in your work?
That's kind of what my job is now, and I've only been in the role for just at a year.
Okay.
So I'm trying to reach out to as many localities and do as many trainings to let people know what VCART brings to the table and what we can assist with.
Okay.
Because I think there is a lot of confusion on what we do and what we can offer. And some people had it in their minds that we're just gonna come in and take over. And, you know,
Right.
with people working in silos and wanting to hold that close to the chest, I try to make it very apparent that that is not what our goal is. We want to come in and enhance what you already have. We want to make things easier for you as the location.
Sure.
Because the reality is we can come in and take that burden off your shoulders short term. We're the sprinters. We come in and do short term. We get you back to that safety and security threshold.
Okay.
And then the locality ultimately becomes the marathon runners. They're in it for the long haul. So we want to take that load off you on the front end so that you have the energy and the resources and the ability to do what you need to do on the back end.
Okay.
And so that kind of becomes where we fit into the mold.
I got you. So, ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce a special guest to the room and everyone who's online. And that would be Councilwoman Mamie Johnson, one of our biggest supporters in emergency management. I appreciate your time, ma'am, being here with us. Is there anything that you'd like to?
Sean, I'm sorry, Sean, I just got off the phone with Sean. Director Reddick, I just want to say, thank you. You know how much I love what you and your team does. And I am a strong supporter of what you do. And I like, learning. This small group, and I'm glad I could get it on my schedule. I'm gonna need you to make that a little bigger, even with my glasses. It's difficult to read. But
I think we can do
thank you all for everything that you do, because it's because of you that you keep our city safe.
Thank you, ma'am. I think you'll enjoy today's conversation. Last month, we talked about technical response with Mike Rose and the Fire Marshal's office and our hazmat folks responding to an East Palestine type of incident here. Today, we're talking about the mass care, the people aspect. And so we just got a quick briefing from the Department of Criminal Justice System, DCJS, and what they bring, because when there's a mass fatality incident, we're going to have a family reception center. And that's where, I mean, immediately after the incident, that's where the death notifications take place, right? So folks are gonna go to find out what happened to their loved ones. And that's where by law enforcement provides those notifications based on the scientific investigation by the medical examiner's office. Once that part is done, then we transition to a victims assistance center. So all the resource supports that are brought in based on the incident is where these power hitters are gonna come in. So we're gonna notify DCGS. Human Services is gonna manage the overall operation. Sarah and her team from CSB are gonna manage the overall mental health aspect and bring more of those resources in. But then DCGS brings in a lot of resources in response to a violent crime, as well as the other agencies that we're gonna go down the list. So you got here right in time.
So, and it sounds like also, Jim, you remember, uh, some time ago when we were working with the citizens. And one of the things that was really important is that we create these hubs. I'm a hub person. I believe that the citizens shouldn't have to come to us. We should be where they are. So in order to do that, you have to be boots on the ground and you have to create these hubs where they will know where you are so that they can go to you. And it sounds that like that is what you're creating. And that is a great plan as far as what we do here in the city. The hub thing is the way to go. And I'm creating it throughout the city as well. Hubs is my thing. So thank you again.
Of course, thank you. So Victims Compensation Fund was Carolyn, I think. She's on the line, right?
There is one last thing I
Oh,
wanted
go
to
ahead.
share with what we do. Going back to the piece where I said it doesn't have to be like 3 or more, 4 or more, 5 or more. The one thing to keep in mind is when I say overwhelmed, if you have something like Virginia, the city of Virginia Beach, when we responded to them, they had an entire governmental block that was affected. Whether it be they were actually in building 2, or whether it be they were in building 1, which was connected to building 2, or listening to it all on the radio because they were in a public service building. Those people were just as affected, and those would have been the key players in who would have typically responded. So that again is where we can come in and make sure that the people that you would typically have as your first responders, your human services, your CFBs, your mental health providers, your victim witness players, have gotten their own care to process their own trauma so that they can in turn then help citizens. So that's again where we can kind of combat a little bit of taking it off your shoulders so that they can heal.
Awesome.
And finish in the background.
Great. Thank you, Dawn. Carolyn, Victims Compensation Fund, and I hope I'm calling it the right thing. I know that the name has changed a time or two. I know you work incredibly closely with DCGS. Can I turn it over to you for a quick brief?
Yeah, absolutely. Our formal name is the Virginia Criminal Injuries Compensation Fund. That's our legal name. But we do kind of um, DBA as Virginia Victims Fund through like a rebranding that happened a few years ago. So some people call it CICF, some people call it VVF. It's all the same, whichever one. Um, what we're a state agency that provides for the reimbursement of out-of-pocket expenses for certain crime-related expenses. We are co-codified coordinators with the Department of Criminal Justice. So likewise, when, just as DCJS is getting notified, they're notifying us, and we actually have a team that is trained and credentialed through the National Organization of Victim Assistance to deploy and either fold in as part of that VCART team, providing group crisis intervention or individual crisis intervention, but with the added focus of criminal injuries compensation. So we actually can and will deploy a team that will come out. They'll help with applicational intake. We can do like informational sessions to make sure that impacted parties are aware of their rights for criminal injury compensation, that they're aware of the process. We can support local services in kind of covering the gap while they're overwhelmed, and then figure out what transition kind of looks like long term. So, like for example, with Virginia Beach, um, when we were working there, we had boots on the ground folks in the FAC that were there to take applications. Following that, we actually sent teams um, to the work site. So we arranged with the city periods in which staff could present for applicational intake. So kind of meeting them where they are in that process. We did informational sessions with each department so they understood kind of what it was, what their rights were, how to preserve or have their reservation of rights taken care of. Um, what kind of documentational needs would be needed for their claim and that sort of thing. And then we worked with the um, like resiliency team moving forward and made sure that there was a smooth transition to local resources following, our return back to the office here in Richmond. So we train the folks at the VB Strong Center. We actually have a web-based system for advocates that is utilized predominantly by victim witness, but like there are certain community-based groups who are able to get access. The VB Strong Center was one of those. So they have the ability to file claims, to monitor the status and disposition of those claims, and kind of help case manage those folks. Um, and, as the ombudsman, my role is to help make sure that folks understand their rights, that those rights are protected throughout the process of the claim, and assist with eliminating any hurdles. So, um, in a deployment, a lot of what I do is really talking with the locality, making sure that the lead investigatory agency understands our needs for documentation, their codified responsibility to provide that documentation to uphold the rights of the victims for compensation, um, that we have a process in place for kind of getting the documentation that we need, and that we're all moving forward in a positive direction, kind of lockstep, to get these things taken care of as expediently as possible.
Carolyn, I really appreciate what you had just said, because I understand that anytime we're dealing with the transfer of funds, right? It's going to require a lot of paperwork. And paperwork that I can't imagine those who are experiencing trauma are in the right mind space to kind of work through. I think I heard that there's more than just one opportunity to do that. And I think there's folks on whom we can rely to help them navigate through that process. But I guess I'm curious, how have you seen good examples of localities in the past that really did everything up front that they could do for the survivor in terms of paperwork? For those in the room that don't know, Miss Lakeisha Boyd in the Commonwealth Attorney's Office is the city's representative who notifies DCJS for other non-disaster related support. So would she be the one, in our case, I'm just trying to think out loud, would Lakeisha be the one who works with the police department about, getting not the transcripts, but the records of the crime and all that stuff that we wouldn't want to expect the families to have to get?
Yeah, of
What?
course. Um, s-
Go ahead.
so we work extremely close with the Office of the Victim Witness and the Commonwealth Attorney, and that's her domain there in that locality, and their office does an amazing job and is a strong partner on a regular basis with the fund. Um, so any claims that would come in with regards to that locality, even if we set them up manually, Victim Witness is going to get access to those claims so that they can upload and help remedy any documentational deficiencies with the claim to kind of offload that burden for the crime victims, and also provides them with an opportunity to connect with a local resource that's familiar with the process, and also if there's criminal criminal prosecution, they're going to be supporting them through that process as well. So they're already kind of looped in and in contact with those victims. Um, we take care of procurement of most of the documentation. In a criminal, like a large scale criminal incident, it's actually a lot cleaner because we can get one report in it, or what's called like a police sheriff report form, like basically a narrative from the investigatory officer that says this is what happened and this is who the victims are. Um, I'll say Virginia Beach did an excellent job after the 531 incident.
Yeah,
Like,
I think. Go ahead.
they did an amazing job, and from the standpoint of like we were on maybe day 2, day 3 of the incident when we got the full list of individuals who were assigned present in building 2, so we were able to quickly establish and vet eligibility. We received very quickly the preliminary like police report, the description of the incident to be able to deem those claims eligible. Um, we established through the city representatives a great line of communication for collateral resources. So, for example, because this was a workplace criminal incident, those folks did have to go through workers' comp. Um, and they were amazing and kind of working with us to make sure that we were aware of who had filed and that we got that documentation timely because the fund by law is a pair of last resort. So we had to have that determination. Is workers' comp going to be approved or denied? As soon as they got their denials, those letters were sent to us for folks who were asking for lost wages. Their human resources department turned around, they provided us with a direct contact to be able to say, hey, this person, here's their documentation. They would turn it around within just a couple days. They really did an excellent job and was like a well-oiled machine from that perspective, getting the documentation to us and eliminating as many burdens as they could for those victims. Um, and I would say that that continued even through resiliency and recovery, even now, like with the VB Strong Center and their case management of the claims that are occurring, and even with like the victim witness office there and their collaborations, they've done a really great job of working with us and making sure we had access to the information that we need, that they were helping us to kind of hunt those things down and provide as clear information as possible to the victim about like what can and should be done.
Thanks, Carolyn. I guess going back to the disaster psychology piece and having realistic expectations, are you able to let us know if there are any of the victims who declined resource support or any assistance at the time?
Yeah, so we probably in that incident, about 50% of the folks who were assigned to building 2 actually applied for victim compensation. Victims do have 1 year statutorily. They reserve 1 year for a filing period. So at any point during that year following the incident, if something changes and they want or have out-of-pocket expenses and need assistance, they can submit and request it. They can submit past that, but there is a statutory requirement for what's called a statement of good cause, which says like, this is why I delayed my filing, which can be that, something as simple as I thought I was doing well. We had one victim who came back and they had said, we saw them in the assistance center and we saw them in their department and they were like, no, I don't need that. I'm good. And then she said, um, she called and said, I need to file a claim. And um, I remember that she had been like so adamant, like, I'm good. This is not, a blip on the radar for me. And um, she said that she was in a Walmart and she was shopping and like a kid came running past her and she dropped everything and started running. And it wasn't until she was like 3 aisles over without her wallet or cell phone or her keys that she realized, maybe I'm not as good as what I thought I was and that I should probably talk to someone. Um, And so we were able to accept that as her statement for good cause, that, you know, she didn't recognize that she required services until this point or wasn't ready for services, and move on with procurement of the claim and services for her.
That they have up to a year. I guess another question I would have is I would like to include at the end of the document, in the appendices, what resources might be available under which circumstances. And where I'm going with that is, do the compensation fund assistance differ if there's a declaration that it's terrorism related, or if there's a presidential declaration that puts into place the Stafford Act and any resources that come with that, which would then, you know, make some of the resources that you provide unavailable? Does it depend on the type of incident, or what resources and assistance?
So it does, like, none of that would really change statutorily. We can provide up to $35,000 in victim assistance for qualifying vic victims in criminal incidents. It doesn't really differ whether that's a sexual assault, a physical assault, a mass casualty. Um, so that those things really don't affect that. There are certain expenses that are only eligible under certain circumstances, like for example, um, with the majority of claims, the primary like qualifying element is that you're the direct victim of a crime. However, there are certain criminal incident types that allows for the service of a secondary or tertiary victim, such as like surviving family members of homicide. So even though they're not the direct victim, the code makes allowances for certain family members, like grandparents, siblings, spouse, children, and grandchildren, to receive grief counseling up to $3,500 per qualifying family member, up to the statutory max of the 35,000. Um, so there are certain things that depend on like the incident type, but it mostly is um, it's all kind of on the table as long as it's applicable and legitimate and they can show how that expense relates to the criminal incident or is derivative of the incident. Does that make sense?
grandparents. They were needed to provide support to the surviving next of kin. So, I think we could bring up to 2. I've heard 5 in some situations. You know, what we can do, but every mass casualty I've been involved with, that's been one thing we've been able to do, to either provide that assistance getting up here or reimbursing them, going back. We're also mobile. So, well, Virginia Beach, we brought a big team up of 11 people. I was like number 11. So I stalked the perimeter of the building and pretty much approached anyone that was upset or crying or looked like they needed something to find out, who are you? What do you need? How can I help you? So that's how we were able to get some of the, find out, connect people to things that belong in the building, get them over to, the Family Assistance Center, the Victim Assistance Center, so they can connect with the other resources. In Chesapeake, I actually went out to people's houses and sat down on the floor with them and did the Virginia Victims Fund applications, or explained that to them and the different resources that would be available. So there, that we are mobile, we can do that. We can return property and things like that, if that's something a locality needs. So we've done it in Virginia Beach, where I think Virginia Beach and Chesapeake both were like, if you could clean it, but give it back to us to return, that's okay with me. Because, if they want to be that face that meets with the family again, does that, we're not about taking over. We're not about getting credit. We just want to make sure it's done the right way and done respectfully to the victims and the families. So I'm also from here, and I maintain a huge resource binder for all of the localities in Hampton Roads. So I also.
She has Norfolk bookmark, I'm just saying.
It's like this, and that's not even all of them. I have more resources than 211. But, so if we have a family that's here, I know, I think it was the Dayton shooting, we had 2 families here. And it was a devastation to that family, and I was able to connect them with resources to make sure they had Christmas that year and get school supplies to go back to school. So, if their families are in this area, I might be able to help them meet these unexpected needs that can take a little bit of the burden off, to give them that flexibility to be able to process their grief and, do what they need to do in the moment for their families.
Nobody thinks of that when they think FBI. I'm just saying, those are resources that I never knew.
Yeah, those are the ones I think that are probably the most important in our area, because DCGS does bring a lot to the table when it comes to resources and connecting with the community, things in the community. But I also maintain lists of funeral homes for different areas, because sometimes we live in such a mobile area with the military and with being a vacation spot. I know with Virginia Beach, I gave them my funeral home list. So if they had anybody that needed to be sent out of state, the family could look that funeral home up online and, reach out to them to facilitate that process to get them the body back home to our birth area or the final resting place.
And, sitting here listening to all of you talk about what you do and what you can bring to the table, it's the human aspect of things. And so with the Virginia Beach shooting, I was a part-time teacher with Virginia Beach Public Schools, teaching math and science. And I told my scholars that I worked 2 jobs, and so they wanted to know what my other job was, and I told them I was a city council, and they didn't understand that, so I brought myself up on YouTube and told them I was famous. And so once I could bring myself on YouTube, they really did think I was famous. But I also wanted them to understand what my second part-time job was as a city council. So we planned a field trip, and not knowing what was going to happen with the Virginia Beach tragedy, I think the shooting happened a day or 2 before our field trip. And so the Virginia Beach children came to Norfolk. And it was during our, what's the one in June, the big celebration. Harbor Fest. It was doing Harbor Fest. So for the children to experience the shooting incident and then to come to Norfolk for Harbor Fest, they really thought that the city of Norfolk, that we had put this big party on for them. And just for 4 hours of being in the city of Norfolk, they forgot about, well, it took away from what had happened in Virginia Beach. And so they wanted to know, is all of this for us? Saying, yeah, you know how to talk about Team Norfolk, all of the people in Team Norfolk, they did all of this for you. That's great. And they really thought that Harbor Fest was all about them. And it did touch on the human aspect of everything. It even impacted their parents to know that the city of Norfolk, when we talk about regionalism, we don't need to wait for the people in charge for us to regionalize. We're doing it right here, right now, just listening to you. You're already regionalizing and beyond because you're impacting so many different lives. So it does change the lives of children as well, just to remove it off of their minds, the mental aspect, the negative impact that it may have on them. So thank you again.
Thank you.
You brought up some points that made me want to ask a question. I dealt with the aviation incident, and one of the things that happened was people had to rush to get off of the aircraft. Their phones were in their purses or in their overhead things. And we all, like, I don't even know my wife's phone number. How do you call somebody telling them you're okay? All the phone numbers you need to program your phone. The other issue that popped up during that one was medicine. The people that got off and that needed to stay overnight, like, I need medicine, I need this, or I need that. So you mentioned FBI would help with those kind of things, but is there another means of getting those, not I want them, but I need them type things in a more expeditious manner, or is it really going to be that crime scene has to pursue everything?
We were pulling things out. I think the personal property team were on the ground the afternoon of the next day by 2. And they were already starting to roll and getting the list they needed to be able to try to match things up to get things back to people.
But it was, I mean, next day, you're trying to call somebody tonight or now.
Potentially. I mean, if that, because we do have, and I can't promise this because that's not my side of the house. Because that was one of the other points I wanted to bring up, though. I don't do this, but obviously we have a lot of specialized talent and fields and abilities in our office, and some of the things we can do is technology related. I mean, so maybe it's possible that if there's something in that is damaged beyond belief and there needs to be a way to reach out to someone, we might be able to track, like if they don't remember their phone number or something like that. It's possible if we have people engaged working with computer related stuff.
I think there's a couple of things that we as a locality can do. One is utilize the Red Cross's Safe and Well website or something like that. And that way, from a messaging standpoint, we can tell folks to go there, because if they needed a ride to the reception center, then we could provide that as well. And there we can help folks log on to that. Or if they don't want to go to the reception center, we can get them right on. I mean, we have the resources to do that.
Medicine was a big problem.
Oh, yeah.
Well, the Red Cross deals with that all the time with people who are burned out of their home, who run out and need medicine, especially with some trauma like that. It was much easier when you had 24-hour pharmacies, but as of beginning of this month, there are no 24-hour pharmacies anymore. So that is, of course, beyond our control, but if there is a pharmacy open, we need to get people medicine.
Yeah, we can do that.
On a daily basis with homes that are protected. So this is And then that, the next class comes all the time.
Yeah, that was one of the things I was gonna bring up. We can, assist, like if they have their heart medication in there and they have to have it like by the next day. We may be able to engage some emergency funds to get that replaced because, you know, they're gonna probably have to pay out of pocket for that. And then most people don't have that kind of money. So sometimes we can assist with things like that. Also, all of the victim specialists that respond to assist with victims, we are trained and understand crime victims' issues and the things that they'll be going through from a different perspective than a lot of other professions. So a lot of what we do is sort of educating people around, this is what you might experience after, living through a traumatic incident. These are the things you're not going crazy, these are normal. Or, we can be proactive and, lead them with materials that maybe they're not in the moment then, that they can process it or read it, or so we can leave them with things that provide them with information that they can have to, go back and look at it, like dealing with the media or, helping them understand, well, I wasn't injured, I wasn't shot, I wasn't hurt. You're still a victim if you were there and you saw it and lived through it. So there's still help for you too. And, how that impacts you. There are a lot of other things that, we can bring with information as well.
Awesome. Thank you. So David, I know you're here representing the Red Cross. I know Adrian is online as well. If with no disrespect, I know Adrian and I have had this conversation about the mental health resources that Red Cross brings. Adrian Grief, would you be willing?
I think I lost you, Jim.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, sorry, I wasn't sure if you could hear me or not.
Yep, loud and clear.
Sorry, because I'm driving. Yeah, so I can just run down very quickly the services that we would or could provide. And again, similar to what everybody else has said, we're not here to take over. We're just here to integrate and ensure that the people affected have all the needs met that we can all work together to provide. So our primary thing would be certainly the mental health aspect. We're typically there within a few hours to support with mental health. We do that on a short-term basis. So if the families were looking for a longer-term support, that's definitely through the local community mental health system. We would then also be able to provide spiritual care and health services. Some of the things you were just talking about, replacement medications, even things like access to a cell phone. We could potentially provide that. Mental health has some funding that they have a very wide latitude to spend it on. So not a lot of money, but certainly enough to buy like a track phone or something like that folks could use, and we can give those to the families. Or we could use one of our Red Cross cell phones and they could make contact with their families at that point. We also do financial assistance. Again, it's really fatality assistance specifically. And so it is for the families of those that did lose loved ones. If they didn't actually lose somebody, but they were hospitalized, we can certainly still use health services to support them. And we can also then provide some other types of assistance to the community, and that could be a longer term type of support for the community at large, as opposed to just to the people directly impacted. I think that's probably it. It's the coordination piece in advance that's the most helpful to us, connecting with all of the other agencies as we're doing here, so that we are all on the same page and working together. We know each other face to face in advance before the actual incident happens. That's one of our big pieces, so that we are all integrated together. But those are probably the primary things: the mental health, the spiritual care, the health services, and the fatality assistance. There's other pieces that we can do, but those are the main ones. So I'll stop there and see if there's any questions, Jim.
That's great, Adrian. Thank you. And just to be clear, there is no need for any memorandum of understanding or anything else like that. It's just relationship. We can call you and that you guys will be there.
Absolutely. And we don't fall, I mean, we certainly work with FEMA and everybody under the Stafford Act, but that does not apply to any of the assistance we do. So it could be a single person in a fire that loses their life. We would provide the fatality assistance and mental health support. Kentucky tornadoes or Camp Fire where we lost 80 plus people, or active shooter events or transportation accidents. Regardless, we'll be there to support the families.
Thank you, Adrian. David, David. Go ahead. Anything you'd like to add to what Adrian had reported?
It's just food, you wouldn't believe, but how, people rely on food and have food at the family reception center is always a big help. Also,
Thank you, David. And so, if you didn't hear online, David, also from the Red Cross, mentioned the availability of food at the reception center. That as soon as I hear food, I think of health. So Eve or Larry, I thought there might have been concerns about food at a previous reception center. Any concerns that you have when food is brought in that we need to take into account and include in our plan?
Hi, everyone. This is Eve from the Norfolk Health Department. I think the main thing would be private individuals bringing in food. And it's not that they have any ill intent. It's just that you don't have any way of tracking the food and knowing how it was prepared and how it was temperature controlled. And the main thing is the temperature control, knowing that it's if it's hot food, that it's been kept hot, if it's cold food, that it's been kept cold. And you of course want to thank people for their generosity. You appreciate people caring. So you have to have a way where you very graciously accept folks' donations. But then you just kind of you take them and you put them to the side. But you want to not serve them to people because you just don't know how that food has been handled and you don't want to make anyone sick. So it's basically, you want prepackaged food, or you want it catered in from somebody, who is licensed and inspected to provide food to people.
Thank you. I don't think we want a disaster on top of a disaster. So thank you for that. Lisa Hicks, also thank you for the email. She let me know that Miss Lucretia Boyd is no longer with the Commonwealth Attorney's Office. Lisa, can you kind of speak more to who's taking that lead in the Commonwealth Attorneys? So Lisa has a fire alarm, which is another. Okay, well, she let me know that there's a change in that, so I'll let you guys know who the replacement is. Oh, Lisa is? Okay, cool. Okay. Rick Ross, so Anthony Lloyd, he and I go back to his Coast Guard days. Like he said on the call, he is the lead for Operation Blessing now for their disaster response. He's also right now the president of SEVA VOAD, which is the Southeastern Virginia Voluntary Organizations Active in Disaster. It's a lot of faith community partners, a lot of different denominations and non-governmental organizations. Anthony, can I turn to you to kind of speak on the mission of VOAD? And let me preface it by saying, we know what the mission is for the folks who have already reported out. We know what resources they bring, how we're going to work together. But there are still other logistical issues that we may need, food and otherwise. And so I have always felt comfortable working with VOAD, who has always been at the ready, always responsive to really help us with any needs that we have. Now, I'm not putting promises in Anthony's mouth, but I know he's a number that we can also call. And it's my intent to keep him informed throughout. And again, knowing that we can reach back to him as our first port of contact if there are any other needs that we have. Anthony, I hope I didn't set up any unrealistic expectations, but can I turn it to you to kind of talk SEVA VOAD?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Jim. Yeah, and for the folks that are on this call and in this meeting, there's a couple of great points that have come out. So the way I would describe the VOAD, the volunteers volunteer organizations active in disaster, The way I explain it is it's a movement of movements. It's organizations that have a mission that is supported by their donors, their partners, their networks, and they range in different sizes. And so you have one in every state typically. Virginia's VOAD is really strong, and they back us up. So SEVA is Southeast Virginia. VOAD is just that. It's a collection of nonprofits that are committed to being good partners, staying informed, sharing resources when, if possible. So it's definitely more collaborative in nature, and they have a humanitarian mission in most instances, and they have a potential to provide support. And what the SEVA VOAD has been doing is tying its notification into each of the emergency managers in the cities in this region, because there's a line on the map, but that doesn't define the region, right? The region is defined by the region itself, and that's what Jim is doing here by including the VOAD. So we're not just one city over another. We can cross a line safely on the map and go and help people and meet their greatest need. So it's just an opportunity for voluntary nonprofit organizations to come in and to meet a need if it fits with their mission, if it fits with their mission focus. So somebody that's a sheltering organization might probably be able to provide assistance there. Some organizations, such as ourselves, Operation Blessing and Mercy Chefs, they have components that provide mobile kitchens, but they may be deployed at a disaster, right? There's just no telling where, because a lot of the larger nonprofits are national in focus. The one comment I would make regarding your feeding needs for something like this is, in your plan, would it be possible to have some type of contract in waiting so you could have a city, county cafeteria prepare the food for the families and the victims, and that way your source is pre-identified in the plan. Other non-perishable food is available as well. I know a lot of the nonprofits there's hunger relief taking place throughout the region, and those are also potential sources of assistance. Hopefully this is a good sketch that you were looking for, Jim, and I'll try to answer any questions as best I can.
No, that's good for me, Anthony. Any questions for? All right, Anthony, if you could take off your VOAD hat and put on your Operation Blessing hat.
Sure.
Again, not to put you back on the spot, but I do want to recognize that Operation Blessing has really helped us in all kinds of incidents regarding excessive heat, homelessness, large-scale disasters. Is there anything that Operation Blessing would be willing to, and we're just not thinking about it on our end, how you might be able to help in a reception center / victims assistance center scenario?
Well, we don't do sheltering, but we do provide we have a couple of different kinds of non-perishable food kits. So if it's they could be donated to the family and taken to their house, for example. We have an emergency meal kit that's got enough food for a family of 4 for 3 days. So that's breakfast, lunch, and dinner for 3 days. And we also have another one that's a little smaller. I think it's 2 days. We have disaster relief cleaning kits. We handed those out during the COVID events. And then we typically have plenty of water. I like to provide our food, non-perishable food, in a meal kit. We do have gift in kind resources in the warehouse, but those fluctuate. They're highly variable. And our warehouse is kind of in the center of the Tidewater region there in Chesapeake. It's right around from the CBN region campus, and we try to be as available as we can. We just got our folks back from Arkansas and Mississippi. And just sort of out of a complete coincidence, Jim, there's an article, I believe it's in the Virginia Pilot today, about the volunteer experience. And the volunteers that are interviewed had been with us a couple of different times, and it's an article that kind of explains that aspect of what Operation Blessing does.
I'll have to look that up. Thank you, Anthony. Thank you, my friend, for piping in and for your continued partnership.
Yes, Jim, thank you. Glad to do it and still standing by and listening to your meeting.
Thank you, sir. So those are at a minimum, the agencies that we're gonna blast a message to. When we know that there's an incident and we're gonna open up a family reception center and a victims assistance center, those are the folks that we're contacting right off the bat. Whether needed or not, I'm not gonna make that determination. I'm gonna reach out to you guys. And Carol, if you get a call from your chain of command that says you're not needed, I'm telling you, you're needed. So please, that won't be coming from us. And that way we can just start having those conversations. Now, obviously, with multiple agencies, we have to also be not only unified in our efforts, but unified in our messaging. And so that's when I look to Chris and Kelly as the leaders of our Joint Information Center to be the ones to craft the messaging, to make sure folks are aware of what resources are available. Obviously not impending on any investigatory information, but making sure that the victims, as well as the media, has the information they need on which to base their decisions and things like that. So guys, can I turn it to you, kind of your thoughts on how you would hope to corral these different organizations and craft a message, which I should preface it by saying last week, our last month, Norfolk Southern, we wouldn't defer folks to anyone else. And I had to think this will be included, but let me turn it over.
Go ahead.
It's a job I wouldn't want, let me tell you that.
I mean, so by this time, obviously, we've stood up the jig within the EOC and have been pushing out messaging. As soon as we're told where that, sorry, I'm used to saying reunification too, so reception center is, there's really the two aspects that we're looking at. So one being obviously making sure the victims and families know where they're going, but the other part of that coin is the media and knowing where they are allowed to set up and where they're not going to have access. And I think that's probably the bigger piece to corral, is to know that, yes, this is where we're going to be putting everybody. You media are staying here. This is your side. You're not to pass. And making sure, and I know Daniel and I were on a call with the regional PIOs yesterday with Chesapeake's kind of debrief of that incident, and realizing that media were able to see through into that, what they were calling at the time, I think, reunification center, and being able to see folks. So keeping that in mind and making sure that we're part of that process when standing up this facility. And so that we are seeing, okay, what is visible? How can we kind of keep privacy where we can in that regard when it comes to media? So those are two aspects right off the bat that we want to make sure we're communicating clearly for that point. Else to that.
At least I know that there's the plan on paper, and then there's what actually happens in the homes, so there's really no one's seen. That's like plans, as they say. People in their free agency, if you will do what they want to do. It's going to be the biggest challenge. You're going to have some people that want to talk to media, even though that they're in the reception center. And they see a problem inviting a camera because they want to be on camera to talk about what they just endured without respect to the other people in the room. So you've got to manage that. The cameras that are everywhere, the other piece that I noticed was people that have access based on their jobs don't necessarily always have the best judgment or the best training on this. Maybe they're there because they work on the grounds crew and they happen to be nearby and they took some photos. And next thing you know, they're tweeting into the news station saying, "Oh, these cool pictures I got," because they want their 15 minutes of fame, or they get something off of that. Personally, those are the things that I found have been the biggest challenges. The media, they're going to try to do their job. The best we can do is to give them information and fill that vacuum, because otherwise they're going to fill it themselves. And I'm a big proponent of give them what you can when you have it, as opposed to waiting to have this, hourly check-in, and here's what we plan to share this hour. it moves too quickly with social media, with online and all the other things that happen. You've got to start pumping information out there as quickly as you can. Obviously verified information, responsible information, but that's where we're going in this mode. I think the other thing I've experienced is maybe the Norfolk Southern issue with Ohio illustrates this a little bit, but sometimes the partners that are involved are your worst anchor, right? They're dragging you down or they're not helping. And that's something that there's no amount of planning that can deal with that or how you deal with that, but you may just have to go with it and grab the bull by the horns, take the information yourself and not wait for them, or maybe not even have their blessing on some of the things that you need to do, because you've got to get the information out and they want to wait and have their lawyer look at it and review it. Like, no, that's not our role. Taxpayer dollars are being expended, resources are being used, people's lives are being affected. Our role is to do those things and communicate those things as quickly and fairly speaking. Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
And then, I see that you have a note about donations management, and I'm sure that'll be addressed a little bit more, but I think that's another point to the messaging, that we would want to push out to is what is being needed, and where that's going to be taken.
Okay.
People have good intentions. We just need to set the expectations from the start if things are needed or not needed. And making sure folks get that information as quickly as possible. You'll have people showing up, depending on what the situation is, I don't know, but I mean, anything from clothing donations and things like that, to bedding and, all this other stuff, and you're going, whoa, 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 whoa. We're not ready to manage this and things like that. So just having that kind of thing in mind, so we know what to message out, and where people should go with what.
Nice. Okay. And I'm glad.
Casualty Center, sorry, after the Mandalay Bay shooting.
Yeah.
The Casualty Center had to turn people away because they had people who continually wanted to bring in food for the volunteers. And it became a problem to manage this donated food for the volunteers when there was more food than the volunteers could eat in a month. Because everybody had good intentions, but it created a new problem that you had to deal with and really need.
Yeah.
Just as a side note, this isn't kind of my purview, but I do know, it's my office, usually our, public affairs officers usually more than happy to retweet out any message that localities want to put together to kind of push it out even further into the public to get that information out. I usually, after I do all the circle of calls, I usually call them, they're like my fifth call, like, heads up, this is going on, don't know if it's, you already know.
Thanks, Drew. Dawn, you have something?
Yeah, I had a question, outside of, I'm making the assumption we're talking about the Norfolk website for emergency stuff.
Yes.
But outside of that, what platforms do y'all use to move your stuff out? I know, like, when we dealt with BCU, they were tweeting things, they were using their student platforms. And so, like, if people came to us and said, where can I follow up for information? We were able to give them resources. So just like in general, what are y'all's plan for, what platforms you're gonna use?
Social media, absolutely, because of the immediacy and the widespread use. You can't call everybody back, but if you tell everybody to go to Twitter or to go to the official city Norfolk Facebook page, they're all gonna get the information at the same time. And I've used that through actual events and it worked wonderfully.
Perfect.
So those notifications would be made very quickly. We would tell, our call centers or whoever else needs that information, refer people here. And the news media knows to look for those things, and the news media becomes your mouthpiece because they're reporting, cities, Twitter reported that XYZ happened, and then now it's out on Lady, and now the whole public knows, okay, we need to shelter in place, or we need to, leave west of the street, or, whatever the instructions may be.
I know that we have Norfolk Alert here, which is Everbridge. And so we can, and I haven't talked with you guys about this, but we know about the keyword opt-in. So whenever there's a special event, we come up with a keyword, and then whoever subscribes to that, if you will, would get all special events, whatever the information is at that time. We can either do a keyword opt-in, or, depending on the number of victims, we could just create a roster and just blast them messages as things come up as well. So that's just one more personal way we can get information out.
So I know they have some capability to be
Yes.
able to,
Yep.
take messages and when people call them.
We typically partner with them during hurricanes. So when Norfolk Cares is overwhelmed, people can also call 211. Yes, ma'am. Is there a question? Yes, ma'am.
So, what about the universities? As our partners, as far as getting certain information, are they partnered with you all? Because we have EBMS, we have TCC, we have some of the major universities right here in the city of Norfolk. So they should be a part of our, I don't know if they're our partners or not.
There's more. He's old, that's Jared Hornick, he's with Old Dominion.
Okay, ODU.
And we do work with Chief Covington of Norfolk State. We do have partnerships. Actually, I was in contact with EVMS not long ago. And knowing that EVMS and ODU is becoming a marriage soon, right? But I guess, Jared, I'm assuming you asked her to ask that question, so you could.
Sure. I mean, we work hand in glove with Jim in the shop. And basically, what do you need from us and how can we support? That's how we helped with beach incident. That's how we help with the city incidents that are going on where we can either help staffing, space, things like that. Those are usually the biggest things that we provide, but we can also tap into specialized resources like counseling services, things like that. Sure.
They actually, that's a good point. So Jared went over to Virginia Beach with me to help with the Virginia Beach incident. When I was hearing your question, I was thinking, how can you get information out to the student body and the hotels? And they have alert systems as well. But what I wasn't thinking, and you're exactly right, I mean, they brought some of the mental health experts over there with them, so their faculty were able to assist.
I just see you said it.
Right.
Because I know that you do a lot out in the community as a university, but serving the people in our great city. And all of our universities need to partner, especially with Chris and Kelly, as far as communications, because they can get it out fast as well and provide resources to the city.
Yes, ma'am.
And Jim, when we usually stand up the EOC and the JIC and start using they're usually tapped in as well. And that includes NPS and some of the others. So once we start that activation, all of that information gets put there and they're able to see what we're doing and pull it. I'm a huge fan of this.
Yes.
So are we.
Yes, right. Did you have something?
Oh, no, I was.
Okay. So last thing on PIO, I mean, and Larry Hill with the health department, I know you've been a PIO for several years. And also participated in the response to Virginia Tech. What other thoughts from your experience might you be willing to share with us as far as things that we should consider, if not already?
So I put something in the chat about this empathy thing that's changing. So thoughts and prayers is no longer proper to say. And we're doing a movement across the country, especially with FEMA trainings, all these new POs we're getting in there to teach our folks to stay away from that. The terminology has become like cold natured. People don't take it seriously. And I don't think when you say thoughts and prayers that it's not sincere any longer. So keep that in mind, because we need to tell our politicians and also law enforcement to stay out of that. And one of the prime examples of one of that, and I'm going to pick on my buddy down in Nashville, and Dan, I know some of you guys know Aaron, but empathy statements are really important, and they're hard to write, and they're hard to be sincere about a lot of times. But people have to get better at writing these types of messages. I became real good at it during the COVID stuff, since we had to do like 20 or 30 of those messages in our area, and it can't be the same. But just a prime example, the news conference, and this is something for everybody to take away for if anything ever happens. So the police chief was standing up talking about the event. Talking about the event, and he went on with the thoughts and prayers. And then he says, I'm turning it over to my PIO, who will release the names of the deceased. And Aaron went on to at that point to provide the names of the deceased. One of the things I'm teaching about this empathy thing is that was the critical point where if you're doing an event like this and your folks are talking, an empathy statement is really important. It's just before you release those names. And people are missing that point because that's when people really care the most. If you can ready to release these names, the empathy statement needs to come out right before you say that. And so there wasn't one. And so I'm putting together this training that I'm finding out that nobody else does. So, because it's much needed. So just for right now, there's a lot of things that happen with these things and we're all getting better and better when they happen. Like you said earlier on about the length of time we'd be able to get the next of kin notified and the identities out there. That's come a long way since Virginia Tech when I was out there. I mean, it took us almost 3 days to be able to manage that. And so now there's other things that are being done to be able to speed up the process, but still be able for folks to do the criminal investigation. So that's about all I have right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Larry. And you've mentioned something that reminded me of something that Chris said. One of the issues in Virginia Beach was the fact that the names were released before law enforcement could do that, because of social media. And folks, I mean, nothing nefarious, just, hey, your loved one had been killed. They got that before the formal notice at the family reception center. And I know there were certain feelings about that. It's not the way you want it to be released. I don't know how you control it, because we still have to follow our methods that are articulated in law. But that's just something to expect, that folks are going to be alerted one way or another usually.
I'll share a stupid story.
Please.
So we had a plane on fire, 737 or 777 engine exploded on taxi, getting ready to take off. 2 workers from another airline who had ramp access and were out doing their job, saw the smoke, saw the fire, hopped in their truck, and while one of them is driving, the other one is filming with the cell phone from the passenger seat and giving color commentary like they were watching a Michael Bay movie. Oh man, look at that. Oh, that's so cool. Look at that. Oh man, that guy looks like he's hurt. And they posted it on YouTube.
Yeah.
Like, there's literally nothing you can do until retroactively to prevent stupid people from doing stupid things. So to that point, hey, I saw Bob guy's head blow up. Somebody's gonna put that on Twitter. You can't do anything about it, but react to it afterward. You would hope that people would have more common sense. I've seen the worst. And people that don't even realize how ridiculously they're behaving until you point it out to them afterward.
And they don't, because I live right across from the Walmart where the shooting was. I live in the apartments right across the street. And I learned about the Walmart shooting because of a Facebook video where one of the employees that had run out was videotaping it and said, hey, I'm at work and this is what I'm witnessing and this is what's going on. And so that alerted me to get in contact with my boss. But yeah, the unfortunate reality is with the climate that we live in and social media, that's kind of one of the things that we spearhead in crisis counseling is, unfortunately, information is getting out there, but with anything else on social media, you have to take it with a grain of salt, and that may not be real information. So, we would recommend you just stay off social media if you're in the midst of, so they can kind of understand that you can't stop stupid people from being stupid.
Right. I was a news reporter for a long time, and I would share with colleagues that the power you wielded at that point in time was no different than having to live that. I mean, you could significantly alter somebody's life by the words that you put forward on the air or in print. And you should take that responsibility very seriously. Well, now, if you've got $500 and you go to a T-Mobile store and you have the ability to have that same role, but without any of the education and responsibility ingrained in you, and it's a different world.
Yeah.
To that point though, that's why it's important that we're, moved in to the situation as quickly as possible and provided even just the basics to get that holding statement out so we can acknowledge whatever the incident may be as quickly as possible. I think we saw in Chesapeake, it took, 2 hours before they got their first statement out or something like that. Yeah, we can't do that because obviously in that 2-hour span, look at all what, it's already out. And, media's already on scene and everything else, so, that's the importance of making sure that we do have something
Well, I greatly appreciate the fact that y'all said, you know, even if it's not everything, we're gonna give you what we have. We're not gonna wait until we have everything to share something. Because I think that's kind of what people need is, they don't need mental health, they don't need food, they don't need water. At that moment, they need information. And so even if you can give them those breadcrumbs that lead them on that trail, that's what they need at that moment. And that's what, you know, that's
And corrective information. So
absolutely.
we, in that instance, like the fire was out within 5 minutes, maybe, and the fire department was right there, it happened on the runway, so they were very close by. But even an hour later, people were still putting out pictures of the plane on fire because that's what they just saw. Right. And I told my staff, go out there and get pictures of the plane with the fire out. And we're gonna start throwing that out there to show people, like, whatever you saw with flames, those flames are gone. It's done, you've moved on. Because you need to be, to Kelly's point, as soon as we know something's being said, wrong or right, we can adjust our messaging accordingly. And
And
that's
it's helpful to tell victims and victims' families that you can trust the information coming from the source, and they're gonna be giving regular updates. So they're not out there scanning and then getting exposed to things that are insensitive or incorrect.
Well, so because the word boss was mentioned, and one of my bosses is here, and she uses social media to relay the messaging. One, I appreciate that. I think for the most part, I don't remember any of our council members ever giving false promises. Yeah, just intention, well intentioned. They're always relaying factual information that the JIC is providing them. So thank you for amplifying the message, and keeping that consistent. I guess one question I would have is, from your perspective, in a leadership role, what could we do to help you get more information out, or is it okay the way it is?
So for me, I'm very careful of what I put out to the citizens. I'm very mindful. But I think the greatest asset that I have in doing my job is Team Norfolk. And what I mean by Team Norfolk, if I'm not sure about something, I can always pick up my phone and call. If I know that they're in the midst of an emergency, I can text. I always have access to them. Because from my perspective, no matter how experienced I am and I know my city, I know the citizens of the city, they're better at their job at that moment than I could ever be. So I feel comfortable with asking questions. Sometimes information comes out extremely fast. And although I do have a clear understanding that once it goes, well, if it comes to me, first, maybe, depending on what the situation, I still may need to verify, is it okay if I share it? I need to know that because they may be sending it to me as the leader, one of the leaders in the city, but it may not be ready to share. So I always have to verify that and make sure that I'm ready to go when I need to go. And so that makes me feel uncomfortable. I think you being a team and you can coordinate, I'm okay. But the other part that I like about Team Norfolk is because I'm boots on the ground. If I need to let them know about something, I can go ahead and let them know. Because they're in the moment. But I'm with the people. So the people are boots on the ground and they get information, they talk a lot and they know. So I gotta be comfortable with sharing them with Team Norfolk, my information that I know. And Chris is really quick and all of Team Norfolk is quick. Hey, Councilwoman Johnson, blah, 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 blah. Okay. He says that I'm his boss, but they're my bosses too, based on what they do, because they help me to be a great city council person. So I'm good.
Thank you.
Thankfully, we've got good.
Oh, yeah.
You don't always have that luxury, because someone might tell you to like drink nature. You just don't know what's gonna be said, and then you've got to deal with that too, because now can't official stores
Right.
giving not the best information. So,
Right. Yeah. Thanks, Chris. The other, so Kelly mentioned the thing in red. We actually have a donations management plan. We have an agreement with the Salvation Army. The only thing we're gonna do is go back to make sure that it's still current. It's been a couple of years since it was last signed. Our mission will always be, to send money, not supplies, but at the same time, so Councilwoman Johnson knows, we don't want to touch anyone's money. We would rather an organization who does that and does it well, they be the ones to receive that funding and determine with you guys who has what needs and where that money should go. So we can facilitate the process, we can communicate the opportunity to send money, but we will have a partner agency like Salvation Army manage that for us. We don't want another disaster on top of a disaster. So I think we're getting, is there anything on the thing? Okay, so I think we're right about at time, and this is exactly the conversation I was hoping we would have today. We will update, well, first of all, I hope everyone is more aware of the resources that exist and how we're gonna notify everybody as soon as there's a disaster of this type. The agencies that briefed out would be getting an emergency alert from Norfolk Alert with that information for a conference line, and you guys were obviously included as well, a conference line and a date and time that we're going to initiate a call. And that way we can start the conversations, give you a briefing on what happened, and then we can kind of talk about next steps from there. I feel really good about this plan because I've worked with every one of you, and I'm pretty sure we could do it even without a plan, but that's not how we operate. So that said, I guess I just want to go around the room with anyone who might have any other information they want to share, either about this particular topic or anything in general that you want to share that's coming up with your organization, agency. I do want to welcome Tom Frazier back again. It's been a long while, so I'll start with you. Anything from Naval Support Activity?
Sure. Next week, as you may or may not know, the Navy's annual hurricane exercise for 2 weeks. First week, I call it response week. Second week, recovery week. So if anybody wants to play in that at all, just let me know.
Oh, thank you.
We actually have a couple of trainings that are coming up. Our one in May is actually full, but we will be planning 2 more. One probably late summer, early fall, and one in the late fall, early winter, to train people if anybody is interested in becoming a volunteer on the team. I can give you my business card today and you can reach out and I can put you in connection with Andrew Kinch, or his email will be on this list of emails as well. So that if it's not in the city of Norfolk and you'd like to respond and you'd like to go with us to offer crisis assistance, we can put you on one of our teams to come with us throughout the state to assist in other areas.
Awesome. Thanks, Don. We'll definitely help push that out too. Sure.
I just have some materials that kind of give a little bit of background on some of the capabilities and what the experience of the different teams are that deploy from Victim Services Division. And then an example of some of the materials that I would bring out if I were to come out and meet with victims or, be involved in a victim assistance center. So you feel free to get some of those if you'd like.
Thanks for bringing those. Thank you.
We didn't have any.
Okay. Good. Nope. All right. Good. Ms. Johnson?
I just want to say thank you. I really appreciate what you do.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. Really, and your support. Chris? I'll talk to you. Yes.
Yeah.
All right. Anyone online?
If there's anyone online who would like to report out anything going on with their organization, you can raise your hand or chime in.
Hi, it's Adrian again with the Red Cross. Just to say, we're actually taking part in a Delaware State Family Assistance Center exercise tomorrow. That's why I'm on the road right now. So I definitely suggest at some point that we do one in Norfolk as well. So just for future thought.
Absolutely. Thanks, Adrian.
Anyone else online?
All right, hearing none, ladies and gentlemen, thank you again for your time, for your partnership. I see you guys as friends, not just partners. So thank you for all that you do. I enjoy meeting with you. And next month's LEPC, we will have an attorney presenting virtually on legal issues pertaining to emergency management. So if you have any legal related questions, please let me know and I'll send them to her ahead of time. But otherwise, it's going to be a fascinating conversation. She lives both sides, legal and emergency management. So I'm really looking forward to that conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jim.
I feel good.